Okay. Okay, I think we're good now. All right, well, Gurudev, is there, it's good to see you. Is there anything you want to share before you take questions?
Well, not too much. Still pretty much finished my book. I have a few things to go over and touch up, so forth. Shastravani, excuse me, is doing Sanskrit editing, which will take a while. And so, anyway, that project is progressing nicely, and it's very gratifying to be at this stage of the project after all this time. So, otherwise, it's nice here and peaceful, and luckily we're very safe and in a protected area as the world goes up in flames.
Yeah. um,
So what are the questions?
sure. So, Bhakti Shakti?
Yes, I unmuted myself. Do you hear me?
Yes, hello.
Okay. Dhanavad Guru Maharaj. I just wanted to ask a question about, because Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that when one knows his transcendental appearance and activities, he does not return to the material world, but goes to his abode. And then in the Chaturshloki, there is also mentioned that if one knows the supreme, like that he's the supreme and that he's the
source of everything.
Param Brahman. Yes, that at first stage it is good to understand his supremacy, and then later that devotees are not interested in his supremacy, but because they have this intimate love. And like, what is good to concentrate, what type of mood we have to develop, and what exactly means to know his supremacy in reality, because like I feel like I theoretically know it, but I don't feel that of course I really understand this, how to actually understand this statement somehow is my question.
Well, I think that of course it's an important statement, and it's basically the approach that the Gaudiya Vaishnavas have taken, the founding acharyas, their approach to Vedanta, an aesthetic approach by which they've come to the conclusion, appropriately, that Krishna is the source of all forms of the Godhead and subsequently everything else. So he's the fountainhead of all being. And again, they've looked at it from an aesthetic point of view and concluded, well, with Krishna, you can have these types of relationships, such as friendly love, romantic love, and so forth. If parental love you cannot have any other form of the Godhead, and even other forms of the Godhead, like Ram and Vishnu and so forth, there are examples in the scripture of them being attracted to Krishna. And therefore, on this basis of aesthetics, Krishna must be the source of all forms of God, and subsequently, they say everything. So this is a foundational stone of tattva, if you will, in the temple of bhakti that you're trying to build in your heart. And one of the ways to think about that, of course, is that if you want to give and love unconditionally, much as loving is giving, then you have to find a center to invest your love in that can take unlimitedly. And that's the idea of Krishna being the source. So he can accept love, for example, in all forms and without restriction. To love unconditionally, you have to give without expectation of return, but you also have to wisely give to where it can be fully accepted. if the love isn't accepted, you're not going to get the reciprocation that and thus the experience that giving is the getting. So it's important to give without expectation of return. But in order to do that accurately, you have to find that in which you can repose such unconditional love, and it will be accepted and embraced. And of course, then as it is, it's generated out and back to nourish the giver. Just like the stomach, if we give all the food to the stomach, then it nourishes. You may give all the food to your tongue, but that's not going to work unless the tongue swallows it and puts it in the stomach, because the stomach's actually the center. So if it goes to the center, then that food, in this example, is reconstituted and in another form distributed to all the parts of the body and nourished. So this is something about the important point of Krishna's Tu Bhagavan Swayam. And if you are to love Krishna as a friend or a lover, for example, well, you can't do that with Narayan. You can't do that with Varaha, Narasimha. Krishna is the person with whom you can do that. And he's depicted as simply playing. And as I said before, one who only plays is all powerful. He doesn't need any weapons or anything. If you're going to play, for example, if you're going to take a vacation, you have to have the power of money in the bank or time off from work and so forth. So play requires power. So he who is only playing has all power. So these are some ways to think about, as I say, the idea that Krishna is the fountainhead of everything. And having located that fountainhead, well, now we can apply ourselves in love in ways that we could not otherwise, or to other forms of the Godhead. And it just so happens that that includes love. It really includes and emphasizes, facilitates love and intimacy, right? And so then there's that shift that you're talking about from, Krishna is the source of everything. He's the supreme Godhead. That's pretty majestic and awe-inspiring, but it comes out on the other end as facilitating a kind of love in which that sense of his majesty is almost transcended, and intimacy is afforded. I wrote an appendix to my book, a Bhavanuvad, or feelingful commentary on the, I think it's 39 verses of Brahma's prayers in the 10th canto, 14th chapter of the Bhagavatam. In the Brahma Vimohan Lila, at the end, Brahma prays. There's a very nice combination there between Aishvarya, Krishna's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the desire of Brahma for love in intimacy. There's a nice statement that I cited there from a comment of Baladev Vijayabhusan, that in the Golok Lila, amongst the cowherd people, on the back of their heads is an imprint that says Aishvarya, but nobody can read it. What he mean? What he means by that is they are. This is very interesting. They are the Aishvarya. That love is the highest majesty. We're putting the two together. In one sense, you're separating that he's the Supreme Personality of God. That's majestic, and then he's not. He's just a friend. But the idea that he's just a friend, that he's just my lover, is the fullest measure of Aishvarya. And they're embodiments of it, but they don't know it, so to speak. It's printed on the back of their head, but they can't read it. They can't see it. Because in that realm, that type of intimate love, well, the Brahma Vivahan Leela is an example in terms of this, the Sakyabhav there that the particular Leela is centered on. It facilitates and brings out the fullest expression of majesty. So that majesty is all there in Goloka, in Vrindavan. It's all there, and it's all really inside of the love in intimacy. So, but your question is kind of perhaps how to put the two together as a sadhaka. And when I think of Krishna as an intimate friend, but I think of him as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Supreme Personality of Godhead. What does that mean? I've tried to explain that a little bit, but I think there's the two sides to that in our life as sadhaka. And one is that with the sadhaka deha, the practitioner's body, the tendency is to show aishvarya. So we don't, for example, interact with the deity in intimacy. We bow before the deity and so on and so forth. But this proper application of our sadhaka deha gives rise to internal life and the siddhadeha in which we can participate in Krishna Lila in intimacy. But in order to do that, of course, the reverential aspect, if you will, of our practice in our sadhaka deha has to have that inner and higher ideal in mind as the goal. So, for example, we pray to Krishna as the supreme. You offer a lamp. Let's say you offered a lamp to Krishna. Esha Deepa, Kling Krishnaya Namaha. And the prayer in that is, you are the light of, all the worlds, the Brahma Jyoti. You are the source of the Brahma Jyoti. I offer this light to you in the hopes. That's Aishvarya, right? That as I begin, I offer this lamp to you in the hopes that you will light my heart with love of that follows in the mood of your friends of Braj. So you've kind of combined the two there. So you have in the sadhaka deha and in the ritual worship and so forth. For example, I'm giving an example of Archan. You've acknowledged his supremacy and so forth, but with the aspiration to know him intimately. There you go. Now you're right side up, whoever that is I'm looking at. Hare Krishna. It's you. Yes, hello. I know you. So, Bhakti Shakti, I hope you're still there. But
yes, I'm here.
Does that help at all?
Yes, thank you very much, yes. Right.
Okay. And also, a little bit further on that, of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna, he's Gaur Krishna, and we serve him in Dasi Bhav, so there's a little bit more of respect there, with like the guru figure, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, so we worship him in that way. And of course, this gives rise to Braj Bhakti, where he can be served, Krishna is served intimately. And that's it, of course, the Dasya Bhakti we have for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is slightly tinged with some fraternal love as well. So it's not like the Dasya Bhakti of Vaikuntha. But it's a little extension on the topic. What else? Another question?
Yeah, I just have to mute everyone first. I forgot to do that at the beginning, so I'm going to do that real quick.
You have.
Okay. Can you unmute yourself, Gurudev?
There.
Okay, great. Because when devotees were coming in, they were not muted. So, Kevin, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. Good morning, Guru Maharaj.
Morning.
My question is, well, still being a neophyte and unfamiliar with the Bhagavatam, I thought it would be a good idea and supportive to read it. So for the past number of months I have been, and I'm just entering the 6th canto now, and recently read about Jamila and the prostitute. And I have to say that when I read that chapter, my heart really broke for the prostitute wife, and I think that I feel so brokenhearted about her because it feels like to me that her actions are judged while her voice seems silenced by the text, and I completely own all of that being my stuff, and I know that I often feel judged and simultaneously silenced by society and by religion. But my question is, how does one approach those parts of the Bhagavatam that uncover hurt in us, or that can trigger feelings and thoughts that may even compete with faith?
Excuse me, you're speaking about Jamil and his
Prostitute wife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that, of course, there's this what that story is about is something quite different. It's not about the prostitute directly; it's indirectly, right. And so she's not even identified, and so on and so forth. And it's really a story about the efficacy of Nam Bhajan. But these stories, in this case, to illustrate the power of the name. You just heard in the 11th canto, in the 5th canto about hellish planets and so forth, mm-hmm. which Bhaktivinoda Thakur has commented on by way of saying this is just really a way of saying that there's a system of punishment and reward or consequence for our actions in the universe without literally embracing the details. And the whole description in the 5th canto is for different persons in the audience than the Raj, Parikshit himself. It's a way of talking about the cosmology or cosmography for mystic yogis who happen to, that's another subject, but you come out of that into the 6th canto, and there's the story of Jamil, and it basically says, even if you chant the name inattentively, you won't see hell, it's such as its virtue, such as its power, and so forth. But yes, that said, it's set in a particular example, as many of the stories of the Bhagavatam are, that may bring up issues for us in contemporary society, which is hundreds and thousands of years later, and social sensibilities may be very different and so forth. So I think that you have to, look at it along those lines and trying to draw essentially what the import is and the extent to which the cultural background or setting to the story brings up issues. Those you have to kind of overlook them. There's something. I'm trying to think what the term is. Presentism, I think, is the philosophical term. Presentism. Presentism means that it's thought to be philosophically mistaken to judge entirely the past. This is kind of related to your question, by standards of today. Let's take, for example, I've given this example before. It's relative to the moment in which we're living in the United States. Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln is known for freeing the slaves with the Proclamation of Emancipation, and so he's celebrated for that. But he is also known to have said, of course, they could never hold office or anything. I mean, that's a given. But so a person is somewhat limited in this world by the time and the circumstance and the knowledge of the world and how it works psychologically, socially, environmentally, scientifically, and so forth at the time. In my perspective, the world is always going to show itself in newer and newer ways. And so it's not showing itself in certain ways in times gone by that it is today. And people were making judgments based on what it was showing and being as honest and true to, the truth, in the case of Lincoln, for example, that he could be. Now we see that, that statement of his that would be considered racist, and very extremely, a form of racism. But in his time, he was, the farthest thing from a racist person, and he was operating, under certain understanding that was more or less how the world was revealing itself at the time, the extent to it. So I think that you have to look at some of the stories of the Bhagavatam like that, and there are other places where prostitutes are also glorified. You haven't gotten to the chapter of Pingala. Pingala is the story of the prostitute, which canto that's in. And she's glorified there for her attraction to Krishna. And she's also highlighted in the Bhakti Sandarbha of Jiva Goswami's Sandarbhas as an example of Rag Bhakti, the highest ideal, her attraction to Krishna. There's the story of Kubja in the Bhagavatam, also in the 10th canto, who had a similar kind of disposition. And there's also the famous story of the prostitute who Bilvamangala Thakur risked his life to meet with in the night. And it was a storm, and nonetheless he crossed the river in the middle of the night, and he went through, he grabbed a rope, and it turned out to be a snake when he tried to climb the wall, and somehow he got in, exasperated, landed there. And she said to him, what's wrong with you? If only you had shown, so much determination and attachment to meeting Krishna instead of meeting with me, which is, all right, but it is what it is. It's my profession, and it's eternal. It's timeless, but your life would change. It would be so much better. And that just struck a note in his heart. And he left that night and went to Vrindavan and became the famous Bilvamangala Thakur. And in his book, Krishna Karnamrita, he pays his pranam to the prostitute, Chintamani, accepting her as one of his gurus. So you can find balances, there's an instance if you keep reading the texts and so forth. And so that may help as well. But, overall, the Bhagavatam is speaking to humans. So from a animal perspective, it may have problems, even from an animal rights perspective, as much as it promotes ahimsa, still it may be problematic. It's talking to men also. Mm-hmm. It's talking to men because at the time, men were the educated persons, and a certain class of men also who could read and so forth. And so whenever you're going to, you're a writer, I believe, if I recall. Mm-hmm. So, you're going to assess your audience and how to, approach them. And, if the book becomes super successful and has a larger audience than the one you are particularly writing for, then some things are going to come up, perhaps with that larger audience on the margins of what you're talking about. So that's that goes with Bhaktivinoda Thakur's statement, no book is perfect. And he was speaking that in a speech speaking about the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam itself says it's not perfect. Vyasa tells Narada that, what's that verse? Tad visargo janataga viplavo yasmin pratishlokam avadavatipi. That this book has imperfections. You may find them, primarily speaking about like grammatical, literary imperfections. I mean, it's 18,000 verses of largely of poetry and some prose, like you find in the fifth canto, and here and there in other places. That's quite an undertaking. So he just kind of assumes at the onset that there are going to be some mistakes here. And they should be overlooked with regard to the essential message and the urgency of that that's being presented, and the effort to go back to Bhakti Shakti's question, to walk on a tightrope between majesty and intimacy. You know, he's the supreme God, but you can associate with him as a intimate friend and so forth. That's quite a task. So he admits at the onset, as I said, that there may be imperfections in the book, and he's also saying that even philosophically speaking, the philosophy is a flawed attempt in theology here, really, to describe that which is beyond word and thought, in word and thought. So I think that in a broader sense, the educated student has to be aware of this, and then when things come up like that and related extended issues, have that kind of understanding to not let them get in the way, damage the faith, and so forth, as you spoke about. You can't expect a book that's written 5,000 years ago to to a particular audience, using certain metaphors, analogies, all relative to the social norms of the time, which some of which those norms may be abhorrent to us in our time, but in that time they weren't, and they worked. And there's also a significant factor there that was in place that's not in place now. What was in place in terms of the significant factor I'm referring to is the idea of what life was for, what its purpose is. Transcend material existence. That was just super, prominent, so forth. So the whole nature of our everyday life then is looked at from an entirely different angle. When you take that out of the picture, or to the extent to which it's there, I believe in God, but they don't give it a lot of thought, then the emphasis is on my life now, my senses, my psychology, how I feel day to day, how to be fair to others in this world, and trying to, as I've said at times, to make this world be what it can't be. You press down here, it comes up there. You press down there, it comes up over here. That's again the small G good that we try to get a capital G good out of, and the Gita tells us at the onset that's not going to work. So you got to go to the capital G good, and so they had that idea really in place. It was spoken to people who already, in a basic sense, fully embraced that. The Bhagavatam is elaborating on the details of the nature of that ideal, that transcendent goal, and so forth. So that's not in place in the world today, and we're trying to make up for it, so to speak, by any measure of political correctness, which is a good thing, but it only goes so far before it becomes a problem. Your the need, the cry for, and rightfully so, social justice today, and so forth, as important is, and is even in the destructive form that the cry takes. I mean, that should be seen as, well, that's how bad some of these people are being affected, that it's so pent up in them that they would react in this way. The problem is deeper than the society wanted to admit or realized, and some people don't realize it at all, and so forth. But that's a problem, and there should be it should be addressed, but then, you know, you can push too far in that direction and it becomes out of balance in another way. And that's just the nature of the world. So it's important to have the transcendental perspective in place. And like I said, you can't expect a book written thousands of years ago, even if its message is eternal and essential and you know and relative to all terms and times and place. You know, it's giving knowledge like sky is blue. That doesn't change. Nonetheless, the way it's packaged, the audience to whom it's presented, is relatively speaking different than the one today. Today, therefore, properly understood, the Bhagavatam is an ongoing, never-ending text. Therefore, we have a book, for example, in our tradition called the Chaitanya Bhagavat, which is the idea that, well, Krishna has come as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu thousands of years later. He has had a Leela that must be the next chapter of the Bhagavatam. And it's thought that the author, Vrindavan Das, is the incarnation of Vyas, who wrote, you know, the Bhagavatam in the Himalayas at the source of the, you know, of the Ganga, rewriting it at the Bay of Bengal, where it empties into the ocean, and magnanimity of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is born. So it's ongoing, and therefore, almost more important than the text is the commentary on the text, which will keep it alive in different time and circumstances. And Prabhupada used to say, when you can use your own analogies, drawn from your own cultural sensibilities and so forth, to explain a point, you know, this indicates some realization, that you're. In other words, rather than just parroting analogies for that, and analogies aren't a proof of anything, of course, they're just a way of trying to bring to light a philosophical point, bring it home, so to speak, for consideration. And they're always going to fall short too. Any analogies, it only goes so far, right? But anyway, when you have your own analogies that come to your mind when looking at the world, and you see it from a Krishna conscious point of view, this is what we want. And this is the living kind of expression of the Bhagavatam that's not limited to 18,000 verses or 10 cantos and so forth. So I think that's the way to look at the revelation itself. And therefore we have an ongoing living commentarial, you know, succession. Does that help?
Oh, immensely. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah, I also really liked that answer and appreciated the question. I'm just really happy it was asked. Omkar, oh wait, I think I have to unmute you because I changed the settings. Let me go and unmute you. Okay.
Oh, Pranam, Guru Maharaj. Omkar.
Yeah.
Sorry, we just froze for a second there. My question, me and Shayla are here, and we're sort of engaging into our new stage of traveling, and we're trying to figure out, or I'm trying to figure out for myself, a sort of standard for altar worship. I know I only have Shiksha initiation. I don't have very much knowledge of the whole Archan process. I've read some in it, but I don't know any of the mantras. Would you guide me along a little bit what at my stage would be good to know, and to avoid some apparats and or offenses and such?
Well, I assume that you have some little altar that you've erected with pictures and so forth. Then you offer your food, maybe you sit before it and chant and so forth, right?
Yes.
Well, that's good. One thing to mention is that Archan, or altar worship, deity worship, and so forth, is, while it is a prominent anga or limb of bhakti, it is at the same time superseded, so to speak, by the more prominent anga, especially in this age, Kali, of Nam Kirtan. So in that regard, any items are offered to the deity, they're offered with nam also. Um, just to, won't go into that, but that's part of the ritual language and so forth. But if, let's say, in doing the seva to the deity, you make an offense, it can be compensated for by kirtan before the deity. So I'm just making the point that of the importance of kirtan, that in a sense, it is a complete form of worship itself. So if you have an altar and you want to offer your food to the pictures, you can place the food there and do kirtan, and everything will be complete. Now, there is a whole detailed anga and subanga, sublim and sublimbs of what constitutes archan, and it can be very consuming and so forth, and absorbing and whatnot. But you need the Diksha mantra for that, and you need to learn that and so forth. And it's not something that's that convenient for traveling with. I mean, it's true that sadhus used to travel with the deity. Prabhupada told me many years ago to get a little deity of Gornatai and travel with the deity, keep him in a box, in a chest, bring him out in the morning, do the puja, put him back to rest, and then go out and send kirtan. So I still do that. I still worship those deities. We still have them, of course. And that's different than in the temple, and you're going to have arti certain times a day, and so forth. The deity worship is really kind of a symbolic representation of the Leela itself, and we try to tie it together with the different times in Krishna Leela, what's taking place there, typically on a typical day of Krishna, and there are songs to sing at those times, appropriate to those times, and so forth. Anyway, you're traveling, and a little makeshift altar. I'm sure it's nice, but I would suggest that you not be too concerned about the deity worship, but to please the deities there by kirtan. Otherwise, you can light incense and so forth. Does that help? Okay, good. So yeah, and offer some cherries. You're going to be picking cherries, right?
Haribo.
Be sure to offer them. Take out the pits. Yeah. Okay. Haribo.
Haribo.
Let me see what the next question is. Padmanabha Swami, do you want to ask your question? I guess I have to unmute you.
Jai Guru Maharaj Pranam.
Yeah.
I have a question regarding Brihad Bhagavatamrita. There is some series of almost 30 verses in the 6th chapter of the 2nd volume where Sanatana Goswami mentions that Akrura is coming to pick Krishna to Mathura, and also he mentions about chastisement of Kaliya, Putana, and others, but all these are happening in Golok. So it seems he's speaking about the Aprakat Lila, while the general idea is that all these Leelas are mostly like Naimitika Leelas, or not constant Leelas that only occur in Gokul, in the Boma Leela. So I don't know if you could clarify a little bit that section.
Uh-huh. Yes. So Mars is asking about, to put it in a simpler way, it's sometimes said there's no demons in Krishna Leela in the unmanifest pastimes, but in the manifest pastimes there are. There's the Kamsa and so on and so forth, but there's no demons there. And that's a general understanding that's sometimes broadcast. Whereas in Sanatana Goswami's Brihad Bhagavatamrita, when the protagonist, Gopakumar, enters the Nitya Leela, the Aprakat Leela of Krishna, he witnesses Akrura coming from Mathura to bring Krishna there to deal with Kamsa. Hmm? And I think Kaliya, the serpent Kaliya, who was chastised in the Prakat Lila, the manifest Lila, is also there. So how to reconcile these two ideas, one, that there's no demons there, and two, that, well, they, according to Sanatana Goswami, there appear to be some, right? That's the question. Hmm?
Yes.
Yes. And there's a couple ways to think about that. One of the ways, of course, is in Krishna Sandarbha, Jiva Goswami says that such persons as Kamsa and so forth, demons like in the Prakatli, like Aristasura or Keshi, the bull, the horse, and so forth, that they're not there in so much as in a literal sense, but more in a figurative sense. So some sense of those leelas that are manifest in this world is also there. The extent to which they're, to use a term, concrete, is questioned by Jiva Goswami by way of saying that they're figuratively there. The feelings of them are there. The bhavas that they give rise to, that plays a role, a significant role in the Leela, are present. Bhavatmika instead of rasatmika. Rasatmika means in the sense that they're visibly present, personally, tangibly, so to speak. And bhavatmika means like, in an internal sense. Just like one could worship Gaur Gadadhar and internally feel them turn into Radha and Krishna, even though externally in the Leela, they're Gaur and Gadadhar and served in a particular way that corresponds with their physical, so to speak, presence. That said, another overarching philosophical point is that as one is absorbed in their sadhana, so one experiences in their sadhana, in their perfection. And within that point is the idea that all of the leelas that are manifest in the world can be present in some precaution, some window of the spiritual world. Each of the frames of the movie of the Leela are eternally existing and can express themselves to a devotee at any time. And so it's possible that with these types of explanations to try to harmonize the two. I'll go a little further with regard to some of the details. Kali, of course, you might wonder about Kali, but Kaliya, amongst the adversaries of Krishna in Braj, was different than all the others in that he was a devotee. He was not sent there by Kamsa. He was there for other reasons, fleeing the wrath of Garuda. And his wives were all devotees, and they wished that he would become a devotee, and their wishes came true. So he became a devotee in the end. So in Dasya Bhakti, so he has some place. When Keshi demon is described, I believe in Brihad Bhagavatamrita, instead of being killed by Krishna, he's tamed and becomes a pony for the cowherd boys to ride on whenever they want. Whereas the Sura, the bull demon, is not slain, but he's turned into a bull for pulling carts and so forth. So in the literal sense, or the exact way in which the Leela plays itself out, those Leelas, killing of Keshi, killing of Vrista, chastising of Kaliya in this world, may not manifest, but some features of it may manifest and it will play itself out differently. With regard to the Kamsa, in Mathura, of course, is a separate Leela, and Dwarka is a separate Leela from the Vrindavan Leela, and they're all going on eternally. And it's certainly a large feature of the Prakat Leela, the separation of Krishna, which is the full measure of which is found in his going to Mathura and on to Dwarka and so on and so forth. But in his Laghu Bhagavatamrita, Rupa Goswami says that Krishna only went to Mathura for 3 months and returned, but then made himself invisible for his own purposes. And the expansion of himself went on to Dwarka and so forth. And I believe that in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, when Krishna is described as being taxied by Akrura to Mathura, 3 months is mentioned. That 3 months is not, many years like we find it in the Prakat Leela, that puts an emphasis on separation as the manifest Leela does. The Aprakat Leela that we're talking about in Golok, the emphasis is on union rather than separation. So the 3 month period is still Prabhas, it's still the lower end of the Prabhas, a short distance of time before of being directly with Krishna and not with him, enough to bring out certain feelings in the Brajbasis in the Aprakat Leela, apparently. So I would say it's there, but not exactly like it is in manifest in this world, and therefore it's not there in that sense. Does that help?
Have to wait 1 second. There we go.
Yes, Guru Maharaj, thank you.
Okay, good.
Righty. And Chaitanya Priya has a question that she asked through the chat, so I have to bring that up. Let's see if I can find it. So Chaitanya Priya's question is, how important is it for a sadhaka to understand constitutional positions via intellectual practice?
I'm not sure what she means by constitutional positions.
Do you want me to ask for clarification?
Yeah.
Okay. You can message me, Chaitanya Priya, if you don't feel comfortable.
I'll assume it's like an identity in the spiritual world. So assuming that, the question would be, how important is it to be intellectually informed about one's position in Leela Seva, in the ideal, the prem, in terms of one's practicing life? I think that it's important to understand the goal philosophically, and therefore, really what I'm involved in, where this is all going, what I'm doing this for, and so forth. Without that, with only a vague understanding of that, at best, then you can misunderstand practices that have a purpose beyond themselves, so to speak, as the goal. I mean, let's give an example. I was very much involved in the distribution of Prabhupada's books, and at one time I had to tell a leading devotee who was so fanatical about it that I used to like to hear and chant, and there was a strong emphasis on going out and circulating the books and so forth. So I did my share of that, but any opportunity I got to hear and chant was much sought after. by myself. And sometimes it was presented as kind of a luxury and being selfish or something like that, which is a misunderstanding. So anyways, when I was emphasizing this, and for example, Prabhupada was making a big effort to establish the Krishna Balaram temple in Vrindavan, installed Krishna Balaram deities. So it was a huge, huge thing for him. From his humble beginning in Vrindavan, as a beggar to, establish a temple there for Krishna and Balaram was a big, big event externally and internally for him. So I had thought I need to participate in this, and all the money that we were raising with the devotees under my direction was all going to build that temple. And so the opening of the temple was a big event that I wanted to go to, because I felt like this is going to give me a huge bhakti samskar for this ideal of fraternal love. So I should be there. I have to be there. And it was going to open at a time that didn't correspond with annual pilgrimage that was had been going on for a number of years during the month of February, March, corresponding with the Punim, the appearance of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Many devotees from around the world would come and participate in a month-long festival, 2 weeks in Mayapur, 2 weeks in Vrindavan. And so this would have been to go and participate in the opening of the temple. I think it was originally scheduled for Janmashtami of 1976, which was in August. For me to go and to take the devotees in my group would have been an extra trip, funding, time away from selling the books and so forth. And so, but I wanted to go there, and as I explained why I thought this is an important event. We're working for it, and it was very pleasing to Prabhupada. We want to be there and see him in that situation and get a strong bhakti samskar for this kind of love. That was my thinking. But I got some resistance from people who didn't have the same understanding. And I had to say to them, well, look, there's not book distribution in the spiritual world. And they just like that they had never thought of it like that. And they couldn't digest it. I mean, it sounds kind of silly, but here they were absorbed in something and, circulating the books, which was thought of as an extended form of kirtan and so forth, but they weren't understanding what its purpose was. What was the purpose of preaching? In one sense, is to purify oneself. You're seeking your own purification in a way that's offering help to others at the same time. It's important to have some understanding of the goal, accurate understanding of the goal, philosophically speaking. That can only inform our practice that much more and help us to avoid seeing particular practice as an end unto itself, so to speak. Another example of that is there are a number of disciples of Prabhupada in his institution, ISKCON today, who feel that any talk about gopis, love, and the ideal in prem is, not something to be discussed. And when Prabhupada was present, he caught this kind of drift, although he emphasized not to unduly be preoccupied with something that you're not eligible for at the moment, but to be preoccupied with that which will give you eligibility for that, requires some knowledge of that at the same time. And when he saw from some comments that this was out of balance, he said, it's not that gopis are bad. So they were so extreme in their not wanting to be preoccupied with something that they're not yet eligible for, that it started to come out like it's a bad thing. Hmm? So Prabhupada, in a simple way, offered a corrective. It's not the gopis are bad. They're good. It's okay. In fact, related to these stories, I had in one lecture, it was many, many years ago, said that and the highest ideal of Gaudiya Vaishnavism is the gopis' love for Krishna. And they're sometimes they do recruiting. Lalita does recruiting and so forth. And some devotee complained and wrote to Prabhupada about it. Tripramars is saying that this book distribution, can be thought of as in a way that's analogous with gopis' love and a means for attaining that. And they were complaining, and Prabhupada wrote back, what he said is very nice. Very nice. So some acquaintance with you have your Sambandha Gyan, which is your conceptual orientation. It gives rise to a particular way of functioning, which is called the Abhideya, the way, the angas of bhakti, for example. And then you have the goal, prayoja. So some acquaintance with all these tattvas is essential. Now, the measure to which we're intellectually acquainted with the goal, that can have its limits. And I think what is required in the basis is that the goal in the form of Sakya Ras or Madhurya Ras is what's being offered by our Sampradaya. And through association with devotees of these temperaments, that's naturally should result in that coming within me. And this is the ideal. And details of that ideal. Let's say I understand I'm under the influence of Madhurya Rasa prominently, and the ideal is a particular type of Madhurya Rasa, the handmaiden of Radha, type of a kind of a platonic love, romantic love for Krishna, Radha and Krishna. And so this is my goal. Now, which gopi, what color is your dress going to be? What's your name going to be? These are details. Now, your question may be, if I may, how much do I have to be acquainted intellectually with those details in order to proceed? I don't think you have to be acquainted with those details intellectually. And acquaintance with those details should come from revelation through practice in the form of particular taste, which should be voiced and expressed to one's guru, and then he or she can help to refine, focus, and edit that for ourselves in advanced stages of practice. Bhaktivinoda Thakur said that one can't really effectively meditate on the specifics of one's ideal in Vrindavan, the form of the prayojan of prem, without a taste for it, because taste will drive that practice. If you don't have the taste, you're not going to be able to do the practice. So there's some measure of eligibility within sadhana that is required for such meditating on such details, and the acquaintance with them should come from, you can be acquainted with, let's say, okay, you can be acquainted with, here's the ideal, here's the prototype. It's written in the scriptures, it's written in the Sanat Kumar Samhita, for example. The Manjari Bhav is like this. The Manjari is typically this age, she looks like this, she just dresses like this, and so forth. A number of things are given. That's very kind of like the prototype, nameless prototype. This is the ideal. Or in Sakyaras there, that can be explained too. So then you have the general ideal. I think that's useful, helpful. But then the details of that will be filled in by yourself when your will is arising out of the influence of the Sarup Shakti and no longer under the influence of the Maya Shakti. So when you come to the stage of ruchi in bhakti, now you're under the influence primarily of the Sarup Shakti, which exists only for the pleasure of Krishna. So your will is going to be only for the pleasure of Krishna, and is going to arise in the context of that ideal that you have imbibed through association and so forth in a general way. And then, so you receive that mercy, and then with your spiritual will, the details will be filled in, and that in conjunction with discussion with advanced Vaishnavas, the Guru, and so forth. And then in the stage of asakti, where one is attached not only to bhakti, but the object of bhakti. The object of bhakti here means Krishna as he corresponds with a particular taste for bhakti. Krishna as a cowherd, Krishna as Yashoda Nandan in Vatsalya Ras, Krishna as Gopinath in Madhurya Ras. He's going to appear slightly differently. Krishna's, you have to understand one thing about this is that Krishna has unlimited forms, and he's going to appear in a different form to every single devotee. And in that Leela, there's going to be a Nanda Maharaj, there's going to be a Subal, there's going to be Lita Vishaka, and they're all going to appear just particularly for that one particular devotee. And that's an interesting point. So anyway, the object of love is particular, corresponds with a particular taste of love. When we become attached to the object of love, that's called asakti. And Bhaktivinoda says at this point, then one is fully eligible to effectively meditate on the Swarup, the details and so forth. And doing so prior to that can be problematic. So I think that we look to Bhaktivinoda Thakur in this regard, because Bhaktivinoda Thakur was fully acquainted with systems that were in place in Gaudiya Vaishnavism that involved, for example, giving the details of one's Swarup to someone who was in the beginning stages of bhakti. Whether they really knew what they were or is another thing, but the person who was giving, I'm saying, and this was, he saw this as a problem. And so and the problem reached so far as to say, like the Guru manufactured the Swarup, so to speak. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur was, opposed to this idea and the problems that it caused. It's one thing, as I was saying the other day, if you read a story and Srinivasacharya gets initiated, and upon initiation he's electrified and realizes his Swarup and so forth. Just take that story, and then hundreds of thousands of years later, or thousands of years later, not hundreds of thousands, but hundreds and thousands, then someone says, well, so what we do at initiation is we give the Swarup, so here it is, but there's no electrical, explosion that occurs. It just becomes a kind of a lifeless ritual. And I'm giving the prototype details from books like Sanat Kumar Samhita that the Goswamis have drawn from, but Bhaktivinoda Thakur saw this was kind of had become like a mechanical ritual, and it lacked substance, and that was seen in the net result. People weren't realizing Swarups, and their parakya involved finding a extramarital partner, in the sadhaka deha, while dressed like a Babaji, for example. So that was a big problem. So he gave a corrective, and this is the corrective, the approach to understanding the Swarup, and how much understanding, which I think is your question, one needs to have intellectually before attaining it. And he basically answered that question in the way in which I'm explaining it. It's important to know from the beginning, the earliest stages of sadhana, what's happening to me, what's the ideal. Within these, what are the windows of opportunity that are there in Gaudiya Vaishnavism? Sakya Rasa through Nityananda's influence, and Madhurya Rasa through Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's influence. My Guru's ideal is this. So, unless there are exceptions to the rule, but anyone would naturally think, okay, if that's my guru's ideal, then that'll be my ideal. So that's what's happening to me. So I think that that's very helpful, that kind of understanding. But it's not important in earlier stages to be acquainted with all the details of that swarup, for example, that form. You'll be able to participate in Lila Seva, meditative form. If you can't meditate, well, very well, then how are you going to have a meditative form? This is like really the deepest form of smarana, Lila Smarana. It requires some eligibility. So come to focus on the interim goal of Nishta. That requires good use of your intelligence and be acquainted with the ideal in general. And as ruchi comes, then you'll have a natural feeling. I've known all along, this is my ideal, for example, to be the friend of Krishna. And I'd like to hear about the friends of Krishna, what they're like, what they do, and so forth, how they interact with Krishna. It's one thing to understand the rasa tattva, the philosophy underlying the rasa ideal. And it's another thing to be a rasika altogether. Just like if you want to watch a movie, but you're a drama student, you're going to get more out of it. Perhaps you're going to know what's going on, when, and what they're doing here and there. So some theoretical understanding of the tattva of rasa is one thing. To be a rasika, that's another. And that other rasika, that comes from realization, from taste, and so forth. And that can't be, that's not an intellectual exercise. That comes out of an entirely trans-rational exercise. So I hope I've answered your question.
I didn't get a reply from her in the chat, but I'm assuming that it was answered.
Hope so. Okay.
Yeah.
So nice to talk with you all. We're out of time, a little over time. Hope to be with you next Sunday.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Gurudev.
Bye.
Appreciate it.
You're
All right, Bo. Recording.